Hi, this is Chase from CNC Commentaries, and today on CNC Movie Breakdowns, we're going to be talking about the film Marriage Story. Came out a few years ago, a film I really enjoy, and I, of course, am joined by my co-host, Fernando.
Hello. We're,
Hello.
we're talking about Marriage Story.
That we are.
It's a very good movie. It's got Adam Driver in it and Scarlett Johansson.
Very upbeat film.
Yeah, this film is very, very wholesome.
Fun for the whole family.
But yeah, it's Marriage Story. This film was really good. I really liked it.
I enjoy this film a lot. It was one of my favorite films of 2019.
This
And
is probably my favorite film of 2019. And that's strange to hear from me because I hate romance movies and movies that deal with love. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. It's got some very strong actors and actresses.
it does.
Very strong performances that completely carry the movie.
This film has just two standout, stellar leads giving career high performances.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
But yeah, why don't we go into our initial thoughts here?
Or why don't you give a synopsis?
Ah, yes, yes. All right, Marriage Story. It was released in 2019. It was directed by Noah Baumbach, and it follows the story of Charlie Barber, played by Adam Driver, and Nicole Barber, played by Scarlett Johansson. Charlie is a stage director, and Nicole is an actor or an actress. And it tells the story of their divorce and their kind of personal struggles that they go through the divorce. And yeah, I really love it. Really.
Love that they're getting a divorce.
Well, I love that they're acting so well in getting a divorce.
Yeah, that's Marriage Story. Let's get into our initial thoughts. What did you think of this when you first watched this when it came out?
Well, I watched it right as it came out because I'm not the biggest fan of romance movies or movies that deal with love. But so I was obviously pretty skeptical going in. But I saw Adam Driver. I saw Scarlett Johansson. You've also got uh, really well-known actors in supporting roles as well. Like you got Laura Dern in this movie, and Laura Dern's a pretty good actress. When she has a good director. But anyway, so yeah,
I wonder what that was a dig at.
but yeah, I really, yeah, but I watched this movie, and this movie is 2 hours. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes. But I thought it was paced very well, and I was intrigued the whole way through. So it was definitely a very pleasant surprise here. But yeah, there are definitely some career defining acting. There's definitely some career defining acting in this movie. I
Yeah,
think especially in the case of Adam Driver. Well, what about
I
you,
agree.
Chase? What are your
Well,
impressions?
when I first watched this, I remember just hearing, it was Noah Baumbach directing, Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson, something, and just a story about a divorce. And I've seen a few Noah Baumbach films, and in my head, when I saw the trailers for this at first, just hearing general synopsis, I'm thinking okay, this is just a modern telling of a Kramer versus Kramer type story. But when I actually sat down and watched it, um, I was I loved it so much. It even at times did bring tears to my eyes, which is strange. A film like this, I think for people of our age, to find emotional, but you do feel for these characters. These characters feel very human, and I think we'll get into that. And I think that's something that makes Noah Baumbach's films so good most of the time, is how he writes pretty realistic dialogue. Um, and yeah, the performances in this film is great, and I think it's gonna go down as a one of those films that people aren't gonna really think about, but when they do, it's gonna just be remembered as like, holy shit, that did come out, and that was fucking incredible.
Yeah.
And yeah,
This movie was quite the banger, and it
so
will be
I
for
can't
many
really
years.
think of anything like adamantly that I dislike about this thing. Like, I can't really think of anything I can like nitpick about it.
Yeah, this
And
movie, it doesn't really have any big problems. Like, I don't see anything wrong with this movie.
I guess we can get into these opening scenes.
Yes. I think this movie has I love this opening, like, so much. It's got such a strong opening. And, it's just so great. But yeah, it opens with it opens with voiceover of kind of like a montage.
Yeah, just a montage.
Yeah, and it's what I love about Nicole, and it's basically or Adam Driver or Charlie. Charlie is reading off a list of what he loves about his wife Nicole, and she, while he's like reading out this list, we kind of get a montage of all of it being demonstrated, and I think obviously it's just like it's interesting to see these characters kind of interact, before we get to know them like more in depth, and before we kind of see their worst sides through the divorce. But yeah, then we kind of get the same thing for Charlie, but as Charlie's montage is going through, it kind of cuts off, and we see that they're actually like reading lists, and that they're kind of like seeing a mediator.
Yeah, like a marriage counselor of sorts. And then he's like, "Well, why don't you guys read off your list?" And then Nicole's like, "No, I don't want to. I don't like what I said in mine." So they never actually hear these things like right then and there.
Yeah, about each other. And then as so, Charlie says that he'll go first, and then the mediator's like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea." And then Nicole storms out ahead, and she's like, "Yeah, well, I'm just gonna leave. You guys are gonna suck each other's dicks." It's just really funny line delivery by Scarlett Johansson. It's a good way to start off the movie. And yeah, I love that scene so much. Like, the entire opening sequence, I think, is done extremely well. Then we cut to a stage, a performance on stage. Why don't you walk us through this, Chase?
Okay. So as mentioned before, Charlie is a stage director that plays. They live in New York, and we kind of get this background of Nicole, on how Nicole is she's an actress. She started out at first doing like kind of like teen films, and she was kind of known as like this girl that flashed herself in a film back in the day, and how she's kind of changed. She met Charlie, and now she's doing theater performances. And it's a nice background on just both of them that we get, and how they kind of met and fell into each other's lives, so to say.
Yeah.
But we see them, and then eventually, Nicole's just kind of done. She's just fed up with Charlie, and she she just notices how their marriage has kind of been in a rut, and it's just not there anymore. Then they don't like love each other.
Yeah,
You know,
they kind of like realized the flaws with each other and fell out of love.
they've just gotten done with this performance, and they're like a restaurant of some kind, and we see all these like fellow stage actors. One who's played by Wallace Shawn. And we hear chatter in the background like, "Oh, do you really think Nicole's going to Los Angeles this time? Do you really think she's leaving Charlie, permanently?" And you kind of get the sense like this isn't like been toyed about before within them, and you know that because she's actually going to leave to Los Angeles this time.
Yeah. And yeah. But after we kind of get that introduction to the degradation of their marriage, Nicole goes to bed and she's woken up by her son and her mother, Jima.
Ma.
Jima. I really like Jima in this story, and she's kind of like she has I don't know she's kind of like energetic.
Yeah.
And
Played by Julie Haggerty.
Yeah, she's very all over the place. And it's just I love one of the first details we learn about her is that her husband, who is now dead, was gay. And I think it's introduced really funny because she was like, I have my now dead gay husband. Just really funny line delivery. Like, this movie is carried so hard by its performances. If this movie had like any less talented actors in it, it would not be nearly as good.
Yeah. I think you say stuff like that, like the dialogue. I just think that's just continuing with Noah Baumbach's realistic dialogue that he does. This isn't a funny film by any means. It's a very somber and sad film, but people do use humor as an outlet when feeling something like that.
Yeah.
But we see Nicole shooting a commercial in LA. I don't remember exactly what the product was, but she was like in like a forest and holding like a fake baby.
No,
And
she's
kind of
filming
like,
for a TV show.
yeah, and she's like, she's got to know. She says to the director, and she's like, no, she should be holding the baby like this. And you kind of see like the mother side of her, and that kind of gets everyone's attention, and they're like, oh, have you ever thought about directing, yada yada. And she's like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to, but Charlie never led me. He always would say, the next play you can do it, the next play, and that never happened.
Yes. And it's definitely we kind of get like the into it like a little bit here with Nicole, because it kind of like shows how Charlie is pretty controlling, and there's definitely flaws with each other in their relationship. Like, Charlie is pretty controlling, and yeah, it's just things like that, and that's why their marriage fell apart. They didn't agree on what to do. But one of the directors, I guess, she refers Nicole to like a lawyer to help leave Charlie. And Nicole's reluctant at first because she's like, oh, me and Charlie agreed to do it with no lawyers. We're just gonna do it like ourselves. But then her director insists like, oh, you gotta call Nora. That's when we're introduced to Laura Dern as Nora, the family lawyer, or like the divorce lawyer. And
she's brutal.
Yeah, she's pretty brutal. I really liked Laura Dern in this film.
She gives a great performance, and I think she rightly that year won Best Supporting Actress.
Yeah, she won Best Supporting Actress. At least somebody in this movie rightfully got an Oscar.
Yeah, it's very
You
true.
know, the other one that was the biggest robbery of 2019.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far.
It was.
But,
Sorry to say. That was straight Grand Theft Auto in that. But yeah.
I think you and I both agree that Adam Driver should have won over Joaquin, even though it's pretty obvious Joaquin would take home the Oscar.
Yeah, Adam Driver should have won Best Actor.
Yes, I agree.
But anyway. Yeah, so Laura Dern gives like an Oscar performance here. You know, she's doing really well. She kind of, you know, her character Nora is kind of like supportive but extremely brutal. And she like it's kind of like weird to watch, but I think it definitely like is pretty cool because it kind of shows like divorce lawyers how they're how at least Nora's like supportive to her client, but she's also like completely brutal and cunning when it comes to the opposition.
Yeah, exactly. She's brutal when it comes in terms of winning the case, and
Yeah, she'll basically
winning
say
this for
anything.
Nicole. But she's also human, and she's still human, and she has these conversations with Nicole, and even like later when she's talking with there's a brief interaction between her and the other lawyer played by Ray Liotta, and in the courtroom they're of course brutal to one another. But then there's a part where like, oh, are you still going to like this charity dinner? And it's like, yeah, of course.
And like you can kind of feel like, oh yeah, you kind of feel like their relationship. Well, Charlie's eventual lawyer Jay and Nora here, like they understand that they have to go against each other in the court, but outside the courtroom they're friends.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say friends, but they're
like nice to each other,
friendly-ish, but
yeah. But yeah, so we kind of get this scene where Nora and Nicole are talking to each other, and they're like, oh, Nora kind of finds her way in with Nicole. She like asks her these questions, and Nicole gets emotional. But yeah, Nicole.
Yeah, I love how Noah Baumbach does these like long form just shots, like very little to no cutting at all, just pure dialogue. That's what Noah Baumbach does best, is dialogue. He's not an action heavy, like lots of stuff going on in a scene type director. And so in this, you get to know Nicole. You start to see her like break down, and you can just see the wear and tear on her face, and how this is breaking her.
Yeah. But yeah, eventually, Nicole does hire Nora. After Nora, Nora basically promises that she's going to do whatever she can to make sure that Nicole wins, or like gets what she rightfully deserves. But then we cut to G-Ma's house, and Nicole is there. Nicole is there with her friend, and they're preparing to give Charlie a letter, and they're preparing to serve Charlie. And serving is like something you do when you're getting divorced. It's basically divorce papers.
Yeah, it's the divorce papers.
Yeah, but G-Ma and Nicole here are having kind of like a disagreement because G-Ma's like, oh, I have my own relationship with Charlie. Like, yeah, you should keep trying and things like that. And her friend is also pretty nervous because Nicole can't be the one that serves Charlie. She has to get somebody else to do it. So then, eventually Charlie shows up, and we didn't even mention that Nicole and Charlie have a child together.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. Henry. Yes, who this is like, I alluded earlier to Kramer versus Kramer, but, this is, of course, they're trying to do this as smoothly as possible, and, well, not... we all know how difficult a divorce can be for a child, especially a young child like that. Yes. And so they're trying to make this as painless as possible.
Yes. But yeah, it's kind of
And I think Charlie is almost a little bit like still reluctant when he is eventually given the papers, because at first, when they're in the kitchen fumbling around, Charlie comes in, he basically makes himself at home because it practically is his home. And, he pulls out like a rotisserie chicken, just starts eating it. He's like, oh, starts talking to Cassie about like a play, you know,
Yeah.
just, like nothing out of the ordinary. Even though he's, been in New York for so and so amount of time.
Yeah, and eventually, he does get served. And, he asks Nicole, like, oh, I thought we were doing this with no lawyers, like, what's going on? And then she's like, oh, she's just here to smooth along the process. We're still gonna do this, friendly. But, obviously that devolves pretty quickly.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's ever like, I think it's very apparent that they still, throughout the entire movie, care for one another.
Yeah. At some points
Um,
less than others, but, there's still that underlying feeling.
well, I feel like, Charlie never wanted it to get ugly like that,
No.
but that was the only, I feel like what I love about this movie so much is it shows both the good and bad from both of them,
Yeah,
which ultimately is very human.
yeah, that's kind of the point of this movie because, this movie is supposed to show how, like, divorce brings out the worst in people. And it's supposed to show how these people who are, like, good people, the worst is brought out of them during a divorce.
But it's also very, very logically put from both of their perspectives.
Yeah. It's just like in real life. Each side has a perspective.
Yeah. One of my favorite like quotes is, there's three sides to every story, the first person, the second person, and then the truth. And so it's kind of like, and that of course, they're each going to have their own different way of how they go about expressing what happened in their marriage and how they're going through this divorce.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, throughout before like all the lawyers get involved, they kind of like, they're kind of still act friendly to each other. They're still going to like be a team for their child.
Yeah.
But then in the best scene in the movie, they're screaming at each other, and they're just yelling at each other and they're insulting each other. It brings out the worst in people. They both got fed up and frustrated. It's very human.
We'll get into that, but
yeah.
Yeah, but just the look on Charlie's face as he sees the envelope and he realizes what it is, and he's just kind of taken aback by it, and he's just surprised, really, and you can tell this is something he never imagined to happen, and in his mind, he's maybe potentially living in like a false, sense of their marriage, thinking everything is still fine and dandy. And then later, I think he finally like comes to terms with like, okay, maybe things weren't actually that great going on.
Yeah.
I mean, we find out that he did sleep with it's like some person at their theater company.
Yeah, someone they work with.
Like a stagehand or something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so, we find out that, or at least now Charlie has to get a lawyer. And so he goes to a lawyer named Jay and Ted. And he goes to Jay and Ted, and Jay is a very curt man. And
he's played by Ray Liotta, so.
Yeah, Ray Liotta, famous for playing Henry Hill in Goodfellas. And yeah, he's a very curt man. He's very like get to the point and things like that. And he basically tells Charlie like, yeah, it's gonna be extremely hard to make a case that you're a New York family because you got served out here in LA. You're the kids in LA, kids going to school here.
Born in LA.
Yeah.
I love how, like the first 30, 40 minutes, this is solely focused on Nicole, and then like, for a good chunk of time now, it's just solely focused on Charlie, and then like, as we start wrap up, the kind of ultimate clash between the two. and resolution.
Yeah.
It gives us a lot of time to focus on who each of these characters are, and what makes them them, and how this both affects them, and you know how they're gonna go about handling it.
Yeah. But basically, with when Charlie's talking to Jay, Jay's asking him all these questions. He's saying like, "Oh, we need to hire a private investigator." He's trying to go for the throat here. But Charlie's obviously reluctant. He's like, "Hey, we're supposed to do this friendly." Yeah, and then he like leaves because he's like, well, I can't afford this, and I don't think this is gonna work out. So he's just kind of like he's kind of like almost spooked at this process. But then
well, he's definitely scared.
Yeah.
He doesn't want this to happen. He doesn't want anything to happen to Henry. He just wants it to continue being okay.
Yeah.
Or continue, going through what
he just wants to keep the status quo.
Yeah.
Then we cut to Charlie talking to his employees at the theater company, and obviously we see his Invisible Man costume and his Frankenstein costume for his son Henry for Halloween, and we get to meet some of his his theater company people, and we find this is where we find out that he had that affair. And it's not exactly, great. It shows that they're flawed. Right?
It shows that he also cares for these theater people. He's like, I forget the name of all of Sean's character, but, he's like, do this, do that. And it shows, like, this guy now he's got to worry about keeping this theater company together. He's got to get all this money. He's got to worry about a divorce. He's got to take care of a kid. All these things, piling on top of one another.
Yeah. But then Charlie gets he gets a call from Nora, and Nora basically tells him like, "Hey, you gotta get a lawyer, or else we're gonna get your stuff. We're gonna file like a default judgment or something. We're gonna get full custody of your child. You gotta get a lawyer." And then obviously this is where we really see Adam Driver kind of get freaked out. And then he eventually meets up with Nicole and his son Henry in L.A.
Well, in that phone call, it's just Nora just putting the pressure on him to make a move and hurry things up.
Yeah.
And already, he's not prepared for any of this. And then to just rush him along further, and you could just kind of get a sense of how overwhelmed he is.
Yeah. But yeah, eventually, he meets up with Nicole, and then and Henry, and they're having a discussion, and Charlie's like, what is this, man? He's like, well, why am I getting calls from your lawyer? And like she said, I think there's a really good line. He's like, I think she's saying stuff that you don't mean.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, Henry doesn't exactly want to go with his father. And, it's kind of, Henry's kind of being a bit stubborn. And, there's that scene with the booster seat where the booster seat isn't exactly, like, plugged in fully. And, Henry still doesn't get in the car. And eventually, Charlie snaps and he's like, Henry, get in the fucking car. And, Henry eventually gets into the car.
I mean, you're laughing. I don't really think it's funny. I think he's just, frustrated with the whole scenario.
But Adam Driver getting frustrated is kind of funny. But yeah. we kind of get like this cool dialogue between Henry and his father in the car, and they're talking about Halloween and Halloween costumes, and Henry changed his mind from Halloween costumes. He doesn't want to be Frankenstein anymore. He wants to be like a ninja of some sort. I don't know.
Yeah, and then another thing in this scene and throughout the entire movie is Charlie helping out Henry, like trying to sound out words.
Yeah, he's trying to help him read.
Yeah, just simple words, and then that plays in later, um, towards the end. But I feel like that might be the only thing that's like kind of really like that ending with it kind of like forced in. But yeah, we see Charlie and Henry going to office buildings he's looking for a divorce lawyer now, and they enter this building, and Henry's kind of looking around. He sees a fish tank, and he's like, oh, I recognize this fish. And Charlie kind of like hushes him and is like, oh, all fish look very similar.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I think I've been here. And then the lady at the front desk recognizes Henry. He's like, oh, hey, little man, you want to feed the fish? And they basically inform Charlie, they can't work with him because his wife already, or his ex, Nicole already went there to have a consultation.
Yeah. And there's a really good line where the secretary lady is like, oh yeah, it happens all the time. Sometimes one partner will go to a bunch of lawyers. That way they're the person they're getting divorced to has limited options.
Yeah, and I think that kind of like instills a little bit of like paranoia or fear.
Yeah.
In Charlie, because like we don't really know if Nicole would do that intentionally. I don't think she would without Nora's interference. But to say she did that, intentionally, ruthlessly, like right now, or just happen to go there, and just not decide on that. Who knows? But now Charlie's kind of like probably thinking like, oh, okay, she already did this to knock down my options. What else
might she do?
Yeah.
It definitely instills paranoia. It's driving them apart, things like that.
Yeah.
The degradation of their relationship.
Yeah,
then we meet Bert, one of my favorite characters. I love this guy.
Well, yeah. Charlie's kind of, he's running out of options, so he decides to make a phone call to G-Ma.
Yeah, a desperate phone a friend.
And G-Ma kind of tells Charlie about this entertainment lawyer from back in the day that she knew, and he decides to check him out. We see Henry and Charlie, in a parking lot, carrying bags. And then he's like, Dad, I dropped my food because you made me carry these damn bags, basically. You can tell just, even Henry's exhausted.
Yeah.
But we go and meet Bert, played by Alan Alda. And yeah, Bert's just, he's just classic Alan Alda.
Yeah.
There's not really much to say.
I really love the entire way he delivers his lines. He's kind of got the sweet old man vibe, and
that's Alan Alda.
Yeah, he seems like the grandpa, or he seems like a grandpa. He definitely gives off that vibe, but he's basically telling Charlie oh yeah, this is gonna be really hard. But he's treating Charlie like a human. It's very different from Jay. Yeah, so Jay was very curt. He was straight to the point. He's like, yeah, we gotta do all of this, all of that. And Bert's like, okay, he's treating Charlie like a human. and they have this very interesting conversation when Bert's like, "Oh yeah, you got to do this stuff just to make yourself look better in the eyes of the court."
And then he keeps saying, like court this, court that.
Yeah.
And then Charlie's like, "Well, we're not going to go to court, right?" And then Bert's like, "No, no, no, of course not. But we always, got to be prepared for if we do."
And there's that really good line where he's like, "Oh, we're not going to go to court, but if we do."
Yeah, but if we do.
Yeah. Then we get Halloween. So, originally...
Not to be confused with Michael Myers.
Not to be confused with Michael Myers. There are no Michael Myers in this film. But, so Charlie's got this really sweet Invisible Man costume.
Mm.
Yeah.
The Halloween costumes in this movie are great.
Yeah. This is a pretty banger Halloween costume. Invisible Man, I'd wear that.
Well, I mean, we see Charlie show up at the house, kind of being like, "Oh, I brought Henry his costume,
Yeah.
and to, wear it." And Nicole kind of tells him, Charlie wants to go trick-or-treating, with her and Henry. And she's kind of like, no, there's going to be a big whole thing with the cousins. We're driving down to here. And then he's just like, "Oh, we'll just have to do 2 separate Halloweens. And, that'll be great for Henry. He'll love it, right?"
Yeah.
And you can tell, especially with Nicole, she gets really fed up at the end.
Yeah, she gets pretty pissed off, and you have, the first yelling match between her and Charlie.
Yeah. She snaps at him, and she's like, "Just no, I don't want you there," basically.
Yeah. But then second Halloween happens, and it doesn't go very well.
It's never as great as the first.
Yeah. Henry barely gets any candy, and Charlie's kind of fed up, and then he gets on the horn with Nicole.
I will say, Nicole's David Bowie costume,
that's pretty solid. It's banger.
Pretty great.
That's something I'd wear. That's a pretty great.
You wish you could pull that off. But yeah, Charlie and Henry, they're going around trying to scrounge up candy, go to a liquor store, just driving around, basically going to houses. People are asleep, not really getting anything.
Yeah.
Just pretty, disappointing.
Yeah, by the end of the night, there's that really sad part where Henry dumps out all the candy he has on Charlie's floor. And it's like a tiny amount of candy. And I was like, wow, that's depressing. But yeah, but then Charlie puts Henry to sleep, and then he gets on the horn with Nicole here, and he's like, "Are you moving out here?" And then this is some yelling.
Yeah. This is the start of their ascension into full blown back and forth.
Yeah, and then Charlie's like, "Yeah, we need to talk, me and you." And then Nicole's like, "No, we need our lawyers to talk." And he's like, "No, I want to talk to you, just me and you in a room."
Yeah, and one thing I loved about this scene that I noticed this time was how it's just their faces and, their profiles.
I really like how this phone call is shot.
The background is completely blurry, and that lets you just be able to focus on their face and their emotions.
Yeah. And so, yeah, Charlie basically is yelling at Nicole. He's like, "What am I walking into? What is going on?" And this is when Nicole reveals to Charlie that she knows that he had an affair. And she basically is like, "Yeah, I hacked your email. I know that you've screwed that lady."
Yeah, I
And
mean, what I also enjoy about this film is how, later in the courtroom scene, there's all these little, you know, things that are said, throughout the beginning parts of the film that are later brought up in the actual court scene,
yeah,
you know.
like little actions that don't seem important at the time.
Yeah, like Nicole, like barely falling down some stairs after she's drank, or well, hacking into a computer is actually kind of, messed up. Um,
Well, yeah, it is illegal.
yeah, that is a crime. But yeah, and then like the whole car seat thing, yeah,
Yeah,
it's just, but later on in court, how like much they exaggerate it,
yeah,
and it like because it's not a lie. All of that, everything that they're saying is true.
yeah.
Um,
It's just it's it's the standard lawyer thing. They just exaggerate the truth.
yeah,
They start off with the truth and they just exaggerate. Like if I hadn't seen this scene, like the scene where Nicole like stumbled down the stairs after she drank a little too much, I would have think she like cartwheeled down the stairs.
um, but yeah, and they definitely, well, they blow up, how much, her alcohol consumption, and etc. We get a an interaction, uh, at a in an office with Nicole, Charlie, Nora, and Bert, and
Yeah,
kind of just setting things up, and talking about the divorce. And
yeah,
then there's this great moment where they're like, should we break for lunch?
yeah. And yeah, so they're going to they break for lunch, and they're passing around menus, and everybody orders except Charlie, and then Nicole ends up ordering for him, and it's I think that's a very neat detail because it shows that Nicole still knows Charlie well enough to be able to order food for him.
Hmm. It
Yeah,
shows like just how much you know time they've spent with one another, and how they know like basically every little thing about each other, how they think, how they feel, um, and how they still care.
yeah. Despite this divorce, there's yeah, as we said earlier, there's that underlying feeling of caring, and then
Well, I mean, this film does end with them, seemingly in good terms.
seemingly, yeah.
Oh yeah,
But then after after they kind of go back and forth a little bit more, Bert takes Charlie aside. They go into like a separate office and they talk
yeah,
about they talk about it, and Bert's just giving him bad news, and
yeah,
Charlie's getting a bit, he's getting frustrated because Bert's still going on about court and things like that,
yeah.
and he's like, "Are we going to court or not?" And then Bert, to try to like calm him down, he tells him a joke, and then uh,
Yeah, he's like, you heard what he said about the space. Charlie's like, fuck the space.
yeah,
You you can tell, like, this is Charlie starting to get a little more hostile.
this is Charlie's breaking point.
Yeah, this is like his tipping point of,
Yeah,
if in order to even have a chance, he's gonna have to play on the same level of, you know, dirtiness that Nora and Nicole are playing.
yeah, and as Bert's telling this joke, we get that really good shot of the clock ticking, and we we get that like really good line. It's probably one of my favorites line. And then Charlie's going like, "Am I paying for this joke?
Yeah, yeah.
Bert, am I paying for this joke?"
It's one of my favorite lines too.
Yeah,
It's so good. I mean, because matter of fact is, this is costing Charlie money,
yeah,
first off, money that, this is money that neither him or Nicole want to be, paying for all of this, tens of thousands
yeah.
of
They're
dollars.
driving themselves broke.
Yeah,
Oh,
which is
and
also, it's also, a statement on, absurd prices of lawyers and
Yeah.
just for let alone filling out divorces and going through the process of
I
actually
think
filling
that
out
we
a divorce.
forgot to point out is that Charlie got a MacArthur grant,
Oh yeah,
which
that
is
major point.
yeah, a $650,000 grant, which goes to geniuses of some kind, and he got it
Yeah.
for his stage directing.
Yeah.
So usually,
They
Charlie likes to put all the money he makes into the theater, but he has to take some of that to pay off his expenses with lawyers, and
they call Charlie a genius, and
yeah.
his genius grant. It's I find it funny because if you aren't aware, for those unaware, this is kind of sort of uh, reminiscent of actual Noah Baumbach and his divorce with Jennifer Jason Leigh. They didn't have a kid, and it's not everything verbatim, but it gets that feeling of like, oh, okay, Noah Baumbach writes what he knows, and yeah,
Yeah. So, yeah, that's so he kind of has that interaction with Bert. He kind of has like that current line. He breaks basically. It's not great here. It's not. And then we cut to him and Henry in his apartment, and Henry's on like a video call with his mom, with Nicole, and we see Charlie's like writing out checks, like $25,000 checks. And yeah, then we cut to Charlie's bringing Henry back to the he's bringing back to Nicole's house, and Nicole cuts Charlie's hair because it's getting a bit long.
mm-hmm.
And we get this really cool like scene where they close the gate.
Yeah.
It's shot so well.
Well, yeah, it's shot well, but damn, it's so on the nose. Like, holy, that's.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that it gets to the point, and I think it's a very, very good point. Because because the power is out at Nicole's house, so they have to like close the gate manually. So Charlie's pushing on one side and Nicole's pushing on the other, and so they're just looking at each other, and eventually the gate closes and they're cut off from each other.
Yeah, and then Nicole, it fades into darkness.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
That's
very,
symbolism, maybe.
Well, yeah, it's very poignant symbolism. Yeah, showing their separation, their continental drift.
Then we get to court, and Noah, or not Noah, Nora and Nicole are sitting outside. They're on like a bench, and Nora's reassuring Nicole. She's like, "Oh yeah, Bert and I, did most of the details. We're gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be fine." Then Charlie shows up, not with Bert, but with Jay.
Surprise.
Yeah. Charlie has fired Bert, and he has gotten Jay. And Nora kind of like freaks out, and Nora's like, "Oh yeah, this is a street fight now. Everything's off the table."
Yeah, no holds bar.
Yeah. Because Jay is a very good lawyer. Jay is like a rival to Nora.
Mm-hmm. This definitely isn't the first time the two of them have tangoed.
No. And we kind of get that scene where Nora goes to greet Jay, and Jay is like, "Oh yeah, you gotta come to the charity event." And then we get the court scene with Jay and Nora. They're going back and forth. We kind of get that like scene. And Jay's just trying to build credibility for Charlie. He brings up the MacArthur grant, and he's like, "Listen, my client is a genius at what he does. He's a self-made man. He got a MacArthur grant."
And Nora's kind of talking about, like none of that would have been possible without Nicole's help and her support. so
Yeah.
she's at least entitled to some of it. And she's a working actress and providing for her family and her son.
Yeah.
Um,
And Jay's like, well, that never would have happened without Charlie. And then Nora's like, but people originally started coming to Charlie's plays because of Nicole. So, it's just kind of the back and forth there.
yeah, it's a constant back and forth, and you can just tell how uncomfortable Charlie and Nicole both feel.
And then we get that amazing, exaggeration of the truth, in which there's that like Nicole stumbling on the stairs, and there's the extramarital affairs, and the car seat, and we kind of get that. And I love the part where Jay brings up Nicole's alcohol consumption, and we just kind of get that close-up shot of Charlie's face, because Charlie told him that, and Charlie's looking very guilty. And then the exact same shot happens, but with Nicole when the car seat is brought up. And it's just showing how like low these guys are willing to go to win. But anyway, the judge is like, yeah, I don't really know what to do here, so I'm just gonna assign an expert, like, I don't know what exactly this lady's job is. She's like a social worker?
Yeah.
Something like that. But she knows a lot about children. And the judge is like, okay, I'm gonna assign this lady. She's gonna interview you. She's gonna interview Henry. And just, she's just gonna see who he's better suited for. Then we get the best scene in the movie.
Yes. We both agree. This is the best scene.
Yes. So Charlie and Nicole finally have that conversation where it's just the two of them in a room like they said they would. And it turns into a screaming match pretty fast. With some absolute top tier acting.
Oh, yes. I love how it starts. Both of them, there's some very clever, framing of kind of having like the wall of the kitchen also separating them, Charlie on one side, Nicole on the other side. I think that's, a nice little touch. But then it, kind of, they're like sitting on the couch and it just starts building. And then, eventually, they both snap.
Yeah. Because Nicole's saying like, yeah, you should have considered my happiness in the marriage. And then Charlie's like, yeah, you were happy, you just decided now that you weren't happy. And they're just kind of like they're going back and forth.
Yeah, Charlie is kind of talking about like what this has done for his career, how he, hasn't been able to be there for the theater.
Yeah, in fact,
they're gonna have to shut it down.
His play is off Broadway now because he hasn't been there to direct.
Yeah, it's got to shut down basically.
Yeah,
because he's taking so much money out.
Like it's so like so sad.
And then Nicole, basically, compares him to his father, and that's Charlie snaps, and he's like,
that's when the fun begins.
Yeah, he's like, don't compare him to my father.
Do not compare me to my father.
Hey man, I'd be the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
like an angry Adam Driver like that screaming in your face is
spooky. Adam Driver's a spooky man when he's angry.
I mean, yeah, he was in the military.
Adam Driver is not a man to be fucked with. All right.
Adam Driver is to be treated like the saint for as long as possible.
Yeah, and we kind of get like here's where they start insulting each other. They start having like those, they start making personal digs at each other.
Well, I mean, I feel like it touches upon like all the little things, like when you're in a relationship, then like aren't like, like all the things you like might like, all like the little nitpicks, so to say, like when you're with a person, romantically, and that you kind of like just brush over and like don't seem important at the time, and like can care less here and there, but we see like might build up into something, if
Yeah.
you stack them all on top of one another, and
Yeah.
yeah, eventually that anger um, is gonna have to release one day, you know,
Yeah.
to some extent.
We kind of get like this screaming match. Adam Driver like he punches the wall in frustration. He has like a dent in it. Then we get that ending line in the argument where he gets right up in her face and he yells in her face like, "Every day I wake up and I hope you're dead."
Dead, like if I, and he says that line, like dead if I could just, know that Henry would be okay.
Like you
I'd wish
get an
that you would
illness or something.
get hit by a car.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Wow, it's just Adam Driver is such a good emotional actor.
you know, Scarlett Johansson is too.
Yeah, I mean, like they're both doing so well here.
Like it's the constant back and forth. It seems very realistic. Like yes, it is over the top and angry, but this feels very real. This feels like some pent up aggression and frustration within both of them and for each other that's just built. And then at the end, after they kind of just, freaking Charlie just, practically, collapses into a ball on the floor crying.
Yeah.
And they have that moment, she's patting him on the shoulder. It's, and like, it's kind of like one of those things, like where you have like one of these conversations with a person and you're like, you sit down with them and you like, some things are going to be said that, it's not going to be good, but they need to be said.
Yeah.
And then there's that mutual understanding at the end, like, okay, neither of us are, okay with the scenario, but these things had to be said.
All right. And yeah, we kind of get that, and it's just extreme. Like every time I watch that scene, like I'll just put this scene on, by itself, or whenever I like want to like watch this scene again. Like I just watched that scene and I was like, wow, how did none of these actors win Best Actor or Best Actress? Like this is Oscar worthy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we can talk about it. This film was nominated for, a good amount of Oscars. Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, Screenplay, even score. The score in this movie is great.
Score in this movie is so good. It's nothing bombastic, but it's so good.
It's I don't even think people realize it's Randy Newman doing the score. People always picture Randy Newman, Toy Story. You Got a Friend in Me. People don't think of all the dramatics that he's done. But yes, Scarlett Johansson, Adam Driver, both nominated, neither won. Of
Which
course,
is an absolute tragedy.
Joaquin won for Joker that year, and Renee Zellweger won for Judy. If I was voting, I would have given my vote to Adam Driver. I'm trying to think who else was nominated for actress that year if I would have picked besides. I think Scarlett Johansson was probably I probably would have given it to Scarlett Johansson too.
Yeah, like I would have given it to both of them. Like this is such good acting. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like I remember the first time I watched that scene, brought me to tears.
Oh yeah, me too. I definitely teared up, and there's another scene coming up that I also shed a few tears at, a little more. But yeah, it's just and this like scene kind of like went around the internet a bit. It's kind of like not like a meme, but just going around this clip of them back and forth yelling. But you just stop and just look at this one scene in a bottle, and this is masterclass acting.
This is masterclass acting. But yeah, then we cut to Charlie and Henry. They're like buying a bunch of board games. Charlie's sprucing up his apartment, because they're gonna the social worker is gonna come and have dinner with them, and have dinner with them. They're gonna like interview them and things like that. And yeah, so I think that scene is done very well, because Charlie, like, he eventually like meets with the woman. The woman comes in, and she kind of like she eventually talks with them, and yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we get like a little montage of Charlie, changing up his apartment, trying to make it feel more homey. And we get this scene before that where, well, at first it's just Nicole talking to the camera, and we think she's talking to like the mediator, the child care worker, because we just hear another voice asking her these questions, and like how much you drink, have you ever done drugs, yada yada. And then we find out, it's they're in Nora's office, and she's like, no, don't say that, you can't say that.
Yeah, she says like society rewards, or society is fine with bad fathers, but it absolutely hates bad mothers. Something like that.
But yeah, we get this scene where this lady comes to visit Charlie and Henry, and just view their so day-to-day life. You can tell Charlie's kind of uncomfortable, and is intentionally being a lot different than he probably would be normally.
Yeah.
He's making like this weird meal that he's like never have had before, and he's like, why is Henry's like, what the heck, what are these things on top? He's like, it's a garnish, Henry. And this woman, I don't know who plays her, but she's just so awkward.
Yeah, she kind of feels like, honestly, she kind of feels like a piece of furniture. Like, she's just kind of there.
Well, yeah, that's her job. She's not supposed to, make a scene or do anything. She's just there to observe. And yeah, that's just her job to, see both of them and how they act. And you imagine, like, people like in that line of work, they normally see people, try and like, Charlie's definitely trying to, be perceived as, the best he can be. This isn't how he'd normally act.
Yeah.
We get this, Henry goes to his room, and they start talking. And earlier, Henry mentioned something about like a knife trick. And this is, this gets brought up later. And he pulls out a retractable knife, and he does this thing. He says, Nicole got him the knife, and he used to do this thing where he retracts the blade back and pretends like he's cutting his arm, okay? And then it's how this is filmed is it's just so unsettling, for lack of a better word. And then, he's like, I do that, and then I, of course, retract the blade, arm's fine. And then we just see his arm start to bleed.
Yeah, he, like, completely sliced his arm.
Yeah, and this is like a big gash.
Yeah, this is like, you need to go to the ER gash.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And
yeah, this is like, fuck my life pain.
This is not okay, and this lady is just here watching him.
And she's like, are you sure you're okay?
Yeah, you sure you don't need to go to the hospital? It's like, no, I'm fine.
Yeah, but the moment she leaves...
Well, no, it just... Oh, and then her leaving, and him, like, trying to get her to leave, he's, like, bleeding on her bag and her shoulder, and, like, he's got to undo the latch on the door to, like, let her out, and he's bleeding on the wall.
Yeah.
just this.
It's so
I don't want
uncomfortable.
to. I don't want to say disgust. It's just uncomfortable. Like it's as uncomfortable as Charlie is. Just having her watch him, and then now she's uncomfortable, and he's freaking got a gash in his arm.
Yeah. And it's definitely like the moment she leaves, he like rushes to the sink, and he's like applying band-aids to this massive cut. It's not
Yeah.
exactly the most ideal medical treatment here, but
Well,
he passes out on the floor.
okay. Yeah. And this is where I was kind of like,
Yeah, the moment I saw the scene, I was like, wow, he is fucking dead.
yeah, I thought he was dead as well when I
I was
first saw this, and
I
I
was
thought
gonna be like,
in
wow,
my
they
head I'm
really
thinking like,
killed him.
holy shit, I did not expect this turn.
Yeah,
Um, which if it did that, I don't know how I would feel. But like, oh my God, just seeing seeing him in that kitchen, blood gashing out, pouring water on it, wrapping his hand in paper towels, just looking frustrated. He's literally paper towels going everywhere. Um, and then he just wraps his arm and then collapses onto the ground. And then Henry just, comes out to get milk. And Henry's like, Dad, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine, just tired.
yeah. Then he just passes out on the floor.
And it's like, okay, and he doesn't want to, of course, tell his son. He purposely turns the other direction so his son won't see his bleeding arm. It's just like, holy shit. He's like, these people are human. There are times in this movie where I both feel bad for both Charlie and Nicole, and I both, despise certain actions they both do.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's an incredibly like unsettling and just powerful scene.
yeah. But then we cut to Nicole singing, and she's singing a Broadway song, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's very nice. She's singing with her mother and her friend, and then she talks to Nora, and she's talking with Nora about how like, oh, nice, you know, Jay, Nora tells her, Jay lost interest. It's gonna be fine. You won. And then she's like, oh, I even got the custody down to 55-45, so you'll have him for an extra day, like every couple weeks.
Just to do that math, so it comes out like her just barely, just to get a slight little edge, just to piss off.
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, Nicole tells her, like, yeah, I want it to be like 50-50. We get the signing of the divorce papers. And then we get Adam Driver singing.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
beautiful.
No, okay, what I love about this formatting, we have this, scene for Charlie, passes out. Then, obviously some time has passed, but it goes straight into, of course, both of them are going to be singing, Broadway songs because they come from theater backgrounds. So it just makes sense. But oh my God, this, if that argument scene is number one for me, this scene where Adam Driver is singing "Being Alive" is number two for me. And it's simple. It's a simple scene, but just the message behind it, if you're not aware, the song's "Being Alive." It's from the musical Company, Stephen Sondheim, and Company is about a single, kind of bachelor, and he goes on he just learns about love and relationships, through married couples and girlfriends past, and kind of starts off as like kind of cynical towards love, and then eventually he comes to truths with check out the musical. It's a good musical, but this scene, it's great.
But yeah. Then we, then we, then we kind of get this scene where, yeah, so, You know, Charlie's alive. He's fine.
He's being alive after his then near-death experience.
Yeah. Um, you know, we kind of get this scene where, you know, Charlie walks into a house and he kind of sees Nicole's, I guess, new boyfriend.
Yeah.
And, you know, he talks with Gma, and then, you know, but eventually he walks into Henry's room, and, Henry is reading, and this is always going back to the, you know, every time when his father would try to help him read. He's reading what Nicole wrote about Charlie. And, you know, he's helping, you know, he sits down next to his son and he helps him read. And, you know, he starts crying reading this.
Well, yeah, this is the first. We've, of course, heard it, but he has not.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of, you know, the reason it's interesting is because, like, you know, Nicole still has this. She hasn't, you know, thrown it away. You know, it's still here.
Yes. And then, you know, we kind of get, like, they go outside and they say their goodbyes. And Charlie takes Henry because it's his night. And that's how the movie ends.
Yeah.
By God, that's such a good movie.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really say it, but, you know, there's this great moment where Nicole ties his shoe. It's just these little things, you know. And then he just rides off. That is Marriage Story.
Yes. It's so good. Like,
yeah.
Dialogue is so realistic. The performances are the best part of this movie.
And honestly, it's pretty, you know, it's a rewatchable film for me. You know, I mean, I wouldn't often, you know, subject myself to, you know, that emotional, you know, stuff, but yeah, it's a great film. What are your, you know, final thoughts and ratings, Nanda?
Well, you know, my final thoughts. You know, I love this movie so much. You know, the performances are so good. You know, sometimes when I'm bored, or when I want to, like, you know, when I want to feel something,
you want to feel alive.
Well, I just turn on that scene of Nicole and Charlie just yelling at each other in the house. It's so good. I mean, like, I do not like romance films, but this is definitely my favorite romance film.
I don't know if I'd call it a romance film, more of like a film about
love. Or a film about love, things like that. Film that contains love. But, you know, it's just like, this is so good, and if you haven't watched it, you need to go see it.
It's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix?
Netflix original.
It was absolutely robbed at the Oscars.
Yeah, you know, besides, you know, we talked about acting, you know, but screenplay, it was nominated for Best Original Screenplay.
Like, the dialogue just flows so well in this movie.
Well, yeah, Noah Baumbach's great at writing, you know, realistic dialogue. For terms of Best Picture, you know, this was in my top 5 for films of 2019.
This is my favorite of 2019.
Of course, you know, I love Jojo Rabbit, Parasite. This is a great film. Yeah, I concur with everything you said. There's only so many times we can say how amazing Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver are in this movie. Adam Driver is a person who I think, you know, he's going to be one of the greats when he's done with his career.
Yeah, Adam Driver's definitely going to be, he's already extremely famous.
Well, a lot of people solely focus on Star Wars for him. They don't look into his more, you know, under-scene stuff. He chooses roles, such, you know, different and nuanced roles, working with so many highly acclaimed directors, you know. Black Klansman, The Dead Don't Die, Silence.
I mean, like, I really hate that people focus on just Star Wars with Adam Driver, because, you know, I have some very strong opinions on those movies.
which we will not get into.
Yeah, so I don't. There, he just does so much better in so many other things. Just don't focus on Star Wars for Adam Driver.
That's enough with that.
You talk about Adam Driver in Marriage Story or something like that. He's so good in this movie.
Yes. What would you rate this film?
10 out of 10, no doubt about it.
Again?
Again. We're talking about some very good films.
I feel like we gotta start saving these. You know, we gotta throw in a few bad movies here and there.
Yeah, I gotta throw in a few mediocre movies.
We gotta. What are we doing? Another Killer Clowns type film?
Killer Clowns type film? Oh boy.
No, I'll give it a 9.
9?
I'll give it a 9.
Really?
Yeah,
What's keeping it from that 10 out of 10?
I don't have any logical justification, but there are films that from that year that I enjoyed a little bit more. I see myself rewatching a little bit more. But it's a great film.
Yeah, great film. Well, that's been Marriage Story. That's been us talking about Marriage Story.
Yeah. If you've listened this far, like the video, comment, let us know your thoughts on Marriage Story. Let us know something you'd like us to cover in the future. Yeah. Should I give a tease for the next episode, or should I say episodes?
Good, go ahead.
Okay. This is these films. Yes, we are doing a little a series of sorts. I did not pick this. This was chosen by you, Nando. We are going to be talking about a pretty big franchise, trilogy. Some films that based on novels, fantasy, adventure type films, all-star cast, visual effects, tour de force. We're going to be talking about the Lord of the Rings trilogy in the next subsequent 3 episodes of this podcast.
Yes.
So strap in, because I'm sure one of us has very strong opinions on these films, and the other one is going to rewatch them.
Yes. It's going to be certainly interesting.
I don't want to jump to conclusions, but there may or may not be another 10 out of 10 in the future, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be another 10 out of 10 in the future.
Hey, spoilers, man.
Anyway. I'm sorry. It's unavoidable.
But from who? That's the real question.
Yeah. I'm going to hit him with the 1-2.
Well, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.